Welcome to My Name is Nobody, a podcast that celebrates the unsung heroes of the Cleveland music scene and beyond. In this episode, I speak with Gary Stulak, also known as G-Rock. For over 30 years, Gary has been a staple in the Cleveland music scene, building an impressive resume of bands he's worked with either on bass or as a sound engineer for various events. This is his story and the bass guitars that helped create it.
It's such a crude attitude. It's back where it belongs. All the new kids growing up on the skids and going Cleveland rocks, Cleveland rocks. Living in sin with the safety pins. Going Cleveland rocks, Cleveland rocks, Cleveland rocks, Cleveland rocks, Cleveland rocks.
G-Rock, what's going on, my man? How are you?
I am doing good, all things considered. How you doing?
Yeah, hanging in there. So,
all we can do.
Yeah, anybody that's ever played in Cleveland in a Cleveland band has probably seen you or knew you because they either used you for sound or as a bass player. But let's go over the history of G-Rock. How did you get started playing bass?
All right. Well, long story short, I started out in fifth grade on clarinet, so that got me into music. My dad was a trumpet player in a very well-known polka band for years. So I got into clarinet, switched over to sax. By the time I was into high school, now I'm listening to rock music, and friends are listening to rock music, and we're gonna be rock stars. Let's all get instruments. That whole story. That was one of the reasons, or one of the things that got me into, it got me into rock music. But also at 15 years old, is actually when I started playing bass. And I picked up the bass. It was my sophomore year of high school. I wanted something completely different. And with getting into the rock music and that, I joined the jazz band playing bass. So I already knew how to read sheet music. It was just a matter of learning bass clef. I already knew treble clef. So it was a pretty simple transition. It's just, different anagrams or whatever they call that to remember the notes up the scale. Mm-hmm. So I still played saxophone in all the other bands I was in school, the concert band, symphonic band, marching band. I was still on saxophone. But in jazz band, I played bass. And also in our, I guess you call it a pep band. We had a whole vocal choir, and we would do shows, and just had a very small band just to back up all the vocalists in that one, in school. So did that as well, and went to Lakeland Jazz Festival, Lakeland Community College Jazz Festival, all 3 years, sophomore, junior, and senior year playing bass, and won Outstanding Musicianship Award. So I figured I'm doing something right. So that got me into playing bass and starting to really learn the theory behind what I'm doing as opposed to what I'm doing on saxophone.
That's the Louis Armstrong Jazz Award.
Yes.
Yeah, senior in high school.
Yes. You can see that up here. That was my senior year of high school. I was awarded that. And from what I was told, all these awards I won in high school for bass, it was just unusual that a bass player, somebody from the rhythm section would win any type of awards, because they usually go to the soloists, your trumpets, your saxophones, and so forth.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It was just unusual. So, of course, G-Rock's head started growing a little bigger because now I'm getting praised for doing something that doesn't normally happen.
Right.
That kind of set the tone for the rest of my music career. Continue doing things that are out of the ordinary and, pushing beyond the limits of what you think you're capable of, or what I thought I was capable of.
So when did you get into how did you go from the transition of playing in a jazz band like in high school to gigging band, whether it be covers or originals, and clubs and bars and stuff?
Okay, well, here's an interesting story, and I'm full of stories. I mean, we could probably make this interview like 6 hours long, because I thought of a very interesting story that I want to share with you, because it's kind of cool. very good friend of mine, childhood friend that I pretty much grew up with. Oddly enough, we did not go to the same school. He went to private school. I went to public schools in Brecksville. He went to Old Trail and, whatever private schools he was in. He picked up the drums because his uncle played drums. Now, he's the one that came to me and said, hey, our other buddy here, he bought a guitar. He goes, I got a drum set. He goes, we need a bass player. He goes, tell your parents you want a bass. So, of course, me, this is my best friend, and I'm 15 or 14 years old at the time, or 15 at the time. Of course, I go running home and, Mom, I got to buy a bass. I got to buy a bass. My buddy Jamie's got drums and I'm going to be in a rock band. And so they agree, they know I'm very much into my music of what I'm doing already. So that's how I ended up getting a bass at 15. The whole point to kind of backtracking through back to high school, because I'll get to exactly answer your question, is my buddy Jamie, his technically stepbrother, is Gilby Clarke. And if you don't know who Gilby Clarke is, he took over for Izzy Stradlin in Guns N' Roses.
Right.
So, I grew up around not only Dad with the polka music, but I also kind of grew up around hanging out with my buddy Jamie so much with what Gilby was doing in his original band, Candy, before his original band was called Candy. That was before he got into Guns N' Roses. So, Gilby was always this guy to kind of look up to because it's like, oh man, we can be rock stars too, because, he had the big hair and the whatever, the leopard print clothes, and, they went all out and did, crazy outfits and the typical 80s thing.
Right.
And then of course he got into Guns N' Roses. So, that was a good in, because anytime they came anywhere, even within a state away from us, we got tickets, and it was come up. Gilby was always like, come out, hang out with us in the band. Well, the band, except for Axel, he was never there. Like we'd go to dinner, and it was always all the guys in the Slash and Duff and, all the guys in the band. And all those guys were just so cool. So it was a really cool experience at a young age to see these guys that are, they're out touring the world.
Right.
and to see like, wow, man, this could be really great. So years later, as I'm playing bass and I've got these real high aspirations for greatness, in high school, just playing in the rock band with Jamie and doing like proms. I think by the time I was a senior, we were doing like proms for some different cities we got gigs at. But before that, it'd be like graduation parties, or somebody would just throw a summer party and say, hey, bring your band out and play. And, never made any money with that stuff.
Right.
So as I got out of high school, I want to keep playing. So I actually answered an ad in Scene Magazine, and it was a band called Buried Alive. And it was two guys, Mike Matz, who he was guitar and lead vocal for Buried Alive. He now plays with Fairweather and a few other bands that he does as well. And Greg Kovac, who is now in Chicago, unfortunately, because this guy is a monster on the drums and sang all the Iron Maiden songs that we did while playing the drums.
You take my life, but I'll take yours too. You buy your musket, but I'll run you through. Know when you're waiting for the next attack. You better stand as the turning back.
Wow.
Absolutely incredible. So I answered this ad and Scene. They needed a bass player, so I got the gig, and just as a three-piece, we'd go out and do, some old school metal. We do just some classic rock. We do like Radar Love and just all this great music, and we just took off like wildfire. It was just crazy how much we gigged in the 3 or 4 years that band was around, that we were together. We were, God, I think we spent entire summers just down East Bank of the Flats when that was all hopping, and you had all these different bars to play at, and it was just, we couldn't book anything anywhere else because we were booked 3-4 nights a week down in the Flats. Right. And all of us, working. Now I'm making money, so now I'm happy about that, but still not enough to really live off of. Of course, as us musicians know, it's not an easy road to try to make it as a local musician anyway, I should say. Back then, I was working doing landscaping, doing new installs, doing sprinklers and stone walls, and like real labor-intensive, hard landscape work, putting in new lawns, and I was doing that 6 days a week and gigging 3-4 nights a week.
Right.
You know, but I was young, 19, 20, 21 years old. Man, I didn't need sleep.
Once you start gigging, that's when you went out and bought a Guild Pilot bass.
It actually wasn't when I started gigging at an older age. I was 15, 16 years old when I bought the Guild Pilot. It's a 1986.
Okay.
The guitar player for the high school band I was in was Tom Stazzone, who has his own production company. He's pretty well known throughout the production end of things in the local music scene. He was Michael Stanley's monitor board man. He still is. Besides having his own production company and providing production for festivals, and he does nothing but big stuff.
Right.
Tommy actually got me for probably about 2-3 years working like the big concerts at like the Agora and Blossom and the Coliseum when that was still around. But we'd be like subcontractors working for Belkin, where we'd get like a check, and we were basically just rolling gear on and off semis, and then these national acts, their local or their road crew would come in and set everything up. But we would get free all access passes. So, I'd hang out backstage, usually by the bass tech.
Yeah.
So I could watch the bass player come off stage and, watch them changing out the guitars, and then watch what the tech was doing with the bass he just brought him, tuning it back up or changing a string or a tuning key or something.
Right.
It was really cool. So it was cool to see that behind the scenes at the big national concerts.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a great experience. Oh, and we got a free T-shirt. So my concert T-shirt collection is massive.
Wow.
So we did a bunch of that. So one day, Tommy, I got off track there. See,
yeah.
I told you I can tell stories. So now Tommy, I went to Tommy one day. I'm like, hey, it's time for a new bass. That one I have that I'm playing is that copy of a Hondo 2, of a copy of another, of a copy of a Fender Precision. So this thing is just like the cheapest, junkiest bass, now thinking back on it, that you could possibly own. But for a very first guitar, that's how my parents were. Buy the cheaper model. If you continue on with it, then we can talk about upgrading, getting better equipment.
Yeah.
So it's exactly what I did. So Tommy and I went down to, like I said, I think it was Akron Music. And we're walking around. I'm looking at all the basses. I'm like, I got some money saved up. Mom and Dad are really cool with me buying a bass. And, and Tommy looks at the Guild Pilot and goes, that's it. I mean, just stop dead in his tracks and look, Garrett, that's it. And that was it. Found a salesman, said, I want this bass. And wrapped it up and took it home and been playing it ever since.
Still playing it to this day.
Still playing it, and now I've I have an endorsement by DR Strings, the handmade strings that's here in the States, and so I have DRs on all my basses, and that's I've got I don't know close to 20 some basses.
Yeah.
So I got DRs on everything.
I did not know you had an endorsement with DR. Yeah,
that came about 3-4, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And it's for a local musician, it's a little bit of a fight, but with the gigs that I was doing, and there's a Facebook presence, and at the time, my website, my GaryStulak.com website is currently down. I'm rebuilding it, so that's gonna be back up. But I had this web presence, and they liked that, and I just kept going after them, and then finally, they came back to me and said, okay, boom, I just got an email one day that said, here's your sales rep, here's your price sheet, there you go. Just call your sales rep and let them know what you want.
Wow.
So on the going back to the Guild, I started using the neons. And
right.
I tried them. I got one set of neons at first just to try them. So I'm like, these things are coated. There's no way a coated string can sound as punchy as this bass sounds. This is such a punchy bass. I mean, you could barely tap the string with your finger, and it'll pop on you.
Right.
It sounds great, which is why I still play it today. It's great for, if I'm doing a fill-in or something, or I'm playing with an 80s band. I used it with Buried Alive. It was my main bass for years. Also with Slammin' a Y Trap, this was my main bass with that band too. And that was a lot of Triumph and Journey and the 80s stuff, but the more vocal intensive 80s music.
Mm-hmm.
I always want to stand out, and I got known over the years for at a gig, just all of a sudden out of the blue, walking off stage and right up on the bar and walking across the bar.
Oh,
So I mean, I had bar owners that the band would show up to play, and the bar owner would be like, "Are you the guy that walks on the bar? Don't want to talk to you for a minute, because here's the rules to you doing that." I'd be like, "Okay," because I knew it was going to happen.
Yeah.
So, and I started doing that in the flats with Buried Alive.
Wow.
And it was because I wanted to, get the crowd. I mean, the crowd was already involved in the flats, but I wanted to get them more involved. So the one bar we played at, the stage was right at the end of the bar. So all they had to do was walk from the stage to a stool up onto the bar. And that place, they thrived on. They loved it. And like the bartender would be walking in front of me as I was walking, wiping down the bar for me. And he'd be yelling to customers, going, "Take your beer, he'll spill it. Take your beer, he'll spill it. Take your beer, he'll spill it." And, the owner of that place was like, he goes, "I love when you do that." He goes, "Because people are drunk and you're knocking drinks over." He goes, "And nobody gets pissed." He goes, "They just order another drink." He goes, "So I'm making, that much more money."
You just sold an extra drink per head. Right?
Yeah, not that that's really a good thing, but I didn't purposely do that. It was just accidental. But, so, now, of course, wanting to be outrageous, now I got these neon greens on it, which, again, they sound great. It's punchy, and they last a long time.
Interesting looking guitar, man. I've never seen a Guild Pilot bass with these triangle inlays ever.
Yeah, this all came stock. This thing is pretty. I've kept it pretty much stock. The only thing I've really had to do with it is replace a few tuning keys here and there. I've had it rewired countless times because the wiring, from me beating on it, and sometimes I'm bouncing it on the stage to, hit my notes if I'm just hitting like an open string, bang.
Right.
And, I started in high school doing the Steve Vai thing with this, where I just throw it and it would just come around, and I would hope that my strap lock wouldn't break or screw, something. But that did happen, and this thing has bounced across the floor countless times. This thing's just a workhorse, and it's a nice beefy bridge on it. The original active pickups, EMGs. Like I said, there's a few new tuning keys. The one tuning key and I have this on several of my basses, is the Hipshot D tuner, just to do the drop D stuff. Just a lot of that 80s stuff. Those bass players, you didn't see a lot of 5-string players where, and so when they recorded some of these songs, especially like the big hair bands, if they did something like Cinderella did something in drop D, the bass player just, boom, dropped his E down to a D, and that's how he wrote the bass line. So even to play one of those songs on a 5-string gets a little bit challenging because he wrote it so it'd be comfortable for him to play.
Van Halen was famous for that. They did a lot.
Yes.
Fair Warning, I think the entire record is in E flat or D, maybe even.
Yeah.
I want to say E flat, but they were famous for having songs that were like an E flat and stuff like that.
Right.
And they were, I want to say they were probably the first band that I've ever heard doing such a thing. I was like, whoa, that's weird. They do strange tunings.
Yeah.
But
there have been bands that have been doing like
Black Sabbath.
And maybe it was after Van Halen started doing, but yeah, Black Sabbath, Rush, Geddy Lee's got certain songs where it's just drop D. If I'm sitting down to learn a song, I'll start out on a 4. If I know the bass player for that band that originally recorded it played a 4, I'll sit down with a 4. And if it's in drop D, then I'll try playing it drop D, with the 4-string drop D. And if it makes sense, I'll do it that way. But I've also been, surprised, because for as much as I was a Duran Duran fan back in high school, I didn't realize that John Taylor played a 5-string on a number of songs, and it shows.
And he's a
you can tell.
monster bass player too.
Yeah, and during all this stuff that's going on, he started doing these videos from home where he breaks down all these different songs. Like he did, I watched just like YouTube videos of him, and he'll say, "Today I'm going to explain how I came up with the bass line for Rio." To be able to go on YouTube and just kind of break away from everything and go, wow, here's somebody that I really, really, and still to this day, respect as a bass player.
Oh, he's
and
amazing.
Enjoy playing songs like Rio. I mean, I don't get to play it that often, but oh my God, it's just so much fun. Just some of their songs are so much fun to play. And then to hear him break it down, and he even went it beyond Duran Duran, and he's got a few episodes where he talks about different songs from the Power Station. Nice to be able to see that breakdown. But that surprised me that I didn't know that he played 5-string on some of these songs. I just thought he dropped deep.
You mentioned Geddy Lee, and I know Rush is one of your influences.
Yes,
when playing bass. You have a Geddy Lee jazz bass.
I do. It's just such a great grungy sounding bass, but you can still get that clean mellow tone. If I'm hosting a jam night and I need to do some blues, I can do it on the Geddy. If I need to do something that sounds like Rush, that's a little more grungy tone, I can do it.
There's so many of them in Cleveland. I know a couple of bass players. I think you probably know him as well. Kevin Carlson.
Yeah.
Plays a Geddy Lee, and
yes. Matter of fact, I'm going to interrupt you there because I know I filled in for him a few times. And if I remember correctly, he's one of the guys. I've had a few of these guys that own them now that have called me up or messaged me on Facebook and said, "Hey, you got a Geddy Lee. What do you think of it?
Yeah.
Is there any negatives to it? You think I should get one?" And so, that, again, here goes the head again, getting bigger and bigger. So now I got local guys calling me to ask what I think of a certain kind of bass.
Carmen from Rubik's Cube is another one. And
oh, yes.
I notice like a lot of people who build guitars or assemble guitars, parts casters, whatever, they're not always, but there's a lot of people that use the Geddy neck. They'll get like an old P bass body or an old jazz bass body and relic it or something like that, or paint it some weird color and do their own pickup configuration. But they always go for the Geddy neck. It must be a great neck. I don't know. I've never played one.
It's an awesome neck. And the difference between that one, when Geddy spec'd out this bass, one of the things he wanted was a tighter radius on the neck. So it's a little bit flatter towards, the back side of it. So it's a lot easier to do those fast runs where you can kind of float your hand and relax your thumb without feeling like it's, sticking out. Because I know anytime I play a precision, that's or a jazz bass that's not a Geddy, that doesn't have that tighter radius, the first thing I notice is, man, that's a fat neck. This neck is just so thin. And that's similar on the Guild. The Pilot bass is like that too. It almost has that same radius that the Geddy bass has. One of my basses is a Hill bass. John Hill made for me.
No, I remember Hill guitars.
Yeah, Hill guitars. And this was just maybe 2-3 years ago that I had them. I've been wanting a Hill guitar. I wanted a custom made bass. And it's kind of like an Explorer style body. It's I told him, I said, I want it to look like a Hill bass. So whatever your main shapes are that you do, that's what I want you to do. The only thing I'm gonna insist on is I want that same tight radius of the Geddy neck. I want that smaller neck. So it does kind of have that Fender neck, and then he did the upside down tuning keys are on the bottom. So that was a learning curve. Now you're backwards when you're tuning.
Right.
You got to go to I'm like G, 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 G. Meantime, my E is going down, down, down. To where the string's almost falling off. So I'm like, why is it not doing anything? That took a few minutes to kind of look at it and go, all right, wait a minute. They're upside down, which means everything's backwards.
Right. I've had Firebird guitars before, and it's the same principle. Everything's upside down, and then there were banjo tuners on top of it, so it made it even worse.
That's got to make it real interesting.
Yeah. Took me a month to learn how to tune my guitar. Yeah. So you were also influenced by Dream Theater, and you have this
Yes.
beautiful Yamaha bass, 6-string, which is interesting.
Yes. Yeah, this bass, this is a signature bass from their Infinity tour. It's got active Yamaha pickups in it. It's got a 3-band parametric EQ, hand to front or back pickup, and then volume. But great, it's a heavy bass, and the neck is I think it's wider than it needs to be for a 6-string. But Young has fingers that are a mile long, so I'm sure to him it didn't really phase him.
Right.
But he used this on. He contracted to have this bass built by Yamaha for the Infinity tour, and he had, of course, several of them on tour with him, but they were all basically either like this turquoise one or he had a burgundy version of it. And what they did was, instead of putting the dots, they still have the dots on the side of the neck, but down the face of the neck, instead of having the dots, he had them use those dots, and they're actually different size dots because it's the infinity sign, and then it kind of goes out and up the neck and down the neck, and it's a really cool feature on this thing. Probably the coolest thing about this bass for me is I have 4 kids, and for one Father's Day, they came up with the idea to look for this bass, for this signature bass. The kids told the wife, hey, I know Dad really wants this bass. So the wife got on eBay and found one and ordered it. And you talk about the biggest surprise of my life. It was like the last gift they gave me. And when I opened this thing up, I can't even tell you. It was just, I about exploded. So what a great gift.
Yamaha makes a great guitar, man, or great bass, I should say.
Yeah, like I said, it's pretty heavy. So to gig with it for an entire night is kind of tough. It gets a little taxing on your shoulder. But it just sounds so nice. And I've tried with with playing the 6-string. It was a matter of learning how do you position your left hand so it doesn't cramp up on you. Because you can't stay in the exact same position. So depending on where you're at on the neck, I just started getting comfortable with what worked for me. And that included kind of moving it around from time to time just to kind of keep from the shoulder getting too sore with the weight of it. But I tried it. I tried hanging it down lower. I tried up a little bit higher. I tried it way up high, which just looked ridiculous. For me, it's just waist level, just a comfortable waist level, just because of the weight. Right. And it's a lot easier to hang on to it all night that way, and play it for an hour or an hour and a half set. And then it's just a matter of, if I need to reach something that I can't reach in that position, you just stand the neck up and, there's ways around it. There's ways you kind of adapt to your instrument, to get the result that you want, to be able to play the way you want to play.
Yeah. It's a nice looking bass. It's beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, that's one of my prized possessions. The Guild, the Getty, I just love. That's my go-to bass. And that Yamaha are just, prized possessions.
Not only has Gary worked with a staggering number of bands on bass, he's worked with an equal number of bands as a sound engineer. I mentioned earlier that you are a live sound engineer.
Yes.
And man, I mean, ever since we've been a band, we've been using you. I think everybody else in the world seems to know you as well, or at least the Cleveland world. How did you get into doing live sound and becoming like a sound engineer?
Well, my buddy that was the guitar player in that first rock band I was in, Tom's Zone, that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah. Started a production company.
Yeah, he started up his own production company, like pretty much out of high school. He was a few years ahead of me in high school, so he was already out of high school, and I was still, a couple of years in, and then once I got into the music scene, he said, "Hey," he goes, "Gary," he goes, I bought a PA, and I've got, I got these great, this great band, the Dinosaurs, that I'm doing production for and running sound for, but I need a helper." He's like, "Can you come out and just help me set up?" And he's like, "You don't even have to stay for the gig. Just come help me set up and then show up at the end of the night and help me tear the gear down and get it out." So, I would go stay. I'm not going to leave. I'm just I go stay. These are bar gigs, and these were plus these are the Dinosaurs. Those are great musicians. You know, you got Stulak. You had, I can't remember all the guys. You had Tommy Dobek on drums. That plays with Michael Stanley. Just these well-seasoned musicians. And I just, I wanted to hang around these guys. So I'd go set up. I'd hang around, and what else am I going to do? I sit back by my buddy Tommy. I didn't know anybody else there at the time, So I go sit back by him and just started watching what he was doing and started asking him questions. And Tommy's like me; he loves to talk about what he does and show off a little bit here and there. So even with the sound system, he'd be like, "Watch this," and he'd throw some echo on lead singer's voice or something like that. I'd be like, "That's really cool. How'd you do that?" Oh, well, that's through this effect unit. Well, how is that wired? I started inquiring about stuff with him. So at the same time, or shortly after I started with Tommy's business production company started growing. He started getting busier, and he actually hired on Mike Horvath, that I worked for years recently. And that's how I met Mike, was working side by side with Tom Scazzone. So Mike stayed with him for a number of years. I stayed with Tommy for a number of years. Mike finally broke off, did his own thing,
and you followed him?
I didn't follow him. I kind of, because Tommy was a high school friend, and Tommy's still a good friend of mine. I'm not sure exactly how it happened, but Horvath had contacted me, and he started using me just periodically at Sly Fox once he got a system in there. Like he couldn't be there one night, so hey, Gary, I need somebody. He goes, all you got to do, he goes, I will have everything set up. Show up, I'll have it on for you, and all you got to do is just push faders and make sure it sounds good. That's it. Here's where the mute buttons are, and he kept it real basic for me. Mm-hmm. So, that was it. I started out just pushing the faders and just kind of looking at stuff and seeing, all right, kind of checking things out. And then, there'd be nights where I wasn't working, or like a jam night, I'd go up there and I just kind of just hanging out, and I'd kind of watch what Mike was doing. He'd be messing with echoes on vocals. I'd look to see what effect unit is that in the rack. And, because back then it was all analog.
Sure.
And, and then I started did the same thing like I did with Tommy. I just started asking more and more questions. And he started using me more and more. And then it finally got to a point where, I said, hey, Mike, I'm going full-time musician. I don't expect to be playing every weekend. Can you use a sound guy full-time? Because I knew Mike, Mike had Aces in North Ridgeville. He had Sly Fox. He was trying to grow his company a little bit. He had his mobile rig that he's going out and mixing with. So I knew, I figured he needed sound guys. Mm-hmm. So I hooked up with him, and that's where, Mike was the kind of guy that it's like, if you want to sit with me on a night when I'm mixing, I'll answer any questions you want. I'll let you play with the board, whatever. But if he needed me, he wasn't going to be there. So he was just kind of throw you into it. Like when he switched the board out at the Sly Fox and went all digital and put the Behringer X32 in there, I show up one day and I call him up and I go, hey, there's a note here sitting here. I'm like, what the heck is this board? And where's the rack with the EQs and I said, where's all the equipment?
Right.
And Mike is like, no, new board. It's digital. Sorry, I didn't tell you about it. There's a note there. Here's how you turn everything on. He goes, it's all set up. It's ready to go. You pretty much just have to push faders, and here's where the mute buttons are.
Right.
So same thing like he did with the analog board. So that, I actually just started learning myself on that board because I started, discovering that there were all kinds of YouTube videos from guys that run that board showing you, different things. So I could look up, how do I route an effect to a certain channel for a vocal, and there's a little 5-minute YouTube video on that. So I just started watching all this stuff and just learned how to navigate my way around. And they do so much, it's really just knowing how to navigate through everything. And, pretty much for the most part, just self-taught on these digital boards.
So you have since broken out on your own.
Yeah, last summer, towards the end of last summer, I kind of broke away from Mike, and my intention was to get a loan, buy my own rig, because I have a means to haul. So, and thank God I didn't do this then. I thought, I'm going to hold off, and I kept doing that. I'm going to hold off because this is a big loan. You're talking like 35 grand.
Right, that stuff's not cheap, man.
No, but to get the nice big rig, and I wasn't getting anything fancy, but by the time you buy, mic cables. I think I had, just to have enough stuff to be able to mix any band mobile. I think I had priced out about $5,000 just in cables. It's just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous.
Right. And you haven't bought stands, clips, snakes.
Yeah, stands, the clips, microphones, all the drum mics, snakes. By the time you buy all this stuff, you're easily 35,000 for, and that was being reasonable on some of the stuff.
Right.
After not doing that, decided instead of getting this loan, I got a different idea. And I called Bill Sikelski, who does main sound guy for Disco Inferno.
Correct.
I've known him for years, and I'm good friends with the guys in disco. Called up Bill. I said, "Hey, listen, I quit working for Mike a couple of months ago, and I got this empty trailer sitting here, and I got bands that would like to use me that I've been in contact with that have talked to me and said, hey, when you get a rig, let us know, and we'll throw some gigs your way."
Sure.
So I said, "Are you willing to put a rig together for me?" And I told, I said, I mean everything, because I don't, if I don't want to have part of a big rig be part mine, part his. I don't want to keep track of that gear that way. You know. He's like, "Yeah, no problem." So, I mean, he's just such an easgegoing, laid back guy. So he's like, "Yeah, no problem. I'll put it together." So, he says, matter of fact, he goes, "I've been wanting to build a couple more subs." So there you go. So, about a month and a half, maybe a couple months after that, Bill's calling me up going, "Hey, all right, your rig's ready. I got it partially set up. If you want to come out here, check it out and pick it up." He goes, "I got mic stands together for you. Mics, I got everything."
Sure.
Like, great.
And you lease it on like a gig per gig basis?
Yeah. Okay. So it's leased gig per gig. Of course, this summer with the pandemic happening, the gigs, even the gigs that were supposed to happen ended up getting canceled for either riots or, just people being stupid or whatever. So it's just
know all about it.
Yeah. Something that's very familiar to all of us. I know there's still some musicians out there that are gigging, but I keep hearing that more and more gigs are getting canceled. And even with my main band that I'm with now, we're down to we were down to 5 gigs from now through October, and they're all up in the air. We don't even know.
Right.
And we just found out that the one of them towards the fall is canceled now. And it was a private, and it was an American Legion, and it came from their national headquarters saying, "Nope, we're not going to have mass gatherings of any kind."
Yeah.
So
I think our first gig back is in 2 weeks, and it's a private event up near the islands, or private club, I should say. And I'll give it a shot. Me personally, I don't see the point in trying to gig right now, but I feel like if I don't, I'm letting everybody down, Right. And then after that, like August 1st, Whiskey Island.
Yeah.
And my thing is I don't know if any of these are even going to happen because of the new mask law and stuff. Like, how's a singer going to sing wearing a mask? You know what I mean?
Right.
And by law now, you have to wear a mask in a bar.
Yeah, I'm surprised because a little bit earlier today, I got a text from a guitar player friend of mine saying, "Hey, you wanna do this one jam night? That's coming up." And I haven't responded yet because I'm just thinking, I'm like, wait a minute, who the heck is who's booking a jam night right now with what's going on?
Right.
Because I'll tell you, for probably about let's say 3-4 years, I've been doing. Up until the pandemic hit, I was doing every Thursday with Felix from Disco, but I was doing jam night with him at Mutt and Jeff's out in Lorraine. And he'd bring in two or three other people to play with us, and to host. And great jam night. Just the variety of music, everything from Latin to rock to alternative rock to country. Just all over the place, all over the map. And it was a great jam night. But, I've talked to Felix a few times, and I haven't asked him about doing jam night again because, I already know the answer. Right. It's at this point, we got to use common sense. Right. Like you said, it's kind of pointless to gig right now. We do with Ace MOLAR. We have next Friday. We have a private at a yacht club that we thought was going to be canceled, and they said no, we're gonna continue on with it. But that was we got word of that a few days ago. That was before they said Cuyahoga County is going to be following suit with the city of Cleveland with mandatory face masks when in public.
Right.
So now, to me, it's that this next Friday's up in the air. Because I don't know, I'm kind of expecting to see a text from Todd to the band saying, nope, they decided it's just going to be too difficult
right.
to be able to pull it off at this point. So we'll see what happens. I mean, I kind of hope it does, because I know with that gig that it's an older crowd, it's a yacht club. These people are I'm sure are following protocols and guidelines. And
don't be so sure of that.
Well,
I wouldn't be so sure of that. There's a lot of people that think that's all bullshit,
Yeah. But it's mostly, well, I don't want to get into that. That's a whole different show.
That's not why we're here.
No. And I do tend to go off on tangents, so I'm going to stop myself right there.
Right. So you're running sound for everybody.
Yes.
And your main band is Ace MOLAR playing bass.
Yes.
But you're also a fill-in bass player, I guess you could say, and you've worked with just about every band that I've ever heard of, and some that I haven't heard of.
Yeah,
you've worked with everybody.
The funny thing is there have been times when I'm set up to run sound, and of course, sound man, you should be there before the band gets there. So I try to be set up and ready so that when the band shows up, I can be out of their way and let them set up. So there have been so many times where I'm like just kind of sitting at the bar, and I come walking up to the stage because the band's starting to come in, and I go, "Hey, I'm Gary. I'm the sound man for tonight." And be like, "Dude, I played with you." And then they would tell me a story of when I filled in with a band they were with some years ago or something like that. And here I've forgotten now, because I played with so many different bands and done so many fill-in gigs that I can't remember them all. It's crazy. Plus I played, I've always had one main band that I played with, and then just done fill-ins. I think it was a very rare. There were very rare times when I was actually like in two bands at the same time.
Right.
And that was like an overlap of I joined this band, then the band I was already in, after a couple of gigs, started getting pissed off that that my schedule now, I'm just not open to any dates because now I have this other band, and and it would kind of phase me out, which is fine. Because I like that, just having one main band, and then I can pick and choose the fill-in gigs. And like at this point, there's a few bands that I will never say no to, and that's Breakfast Club.
Right.
Because I love those guys.
Yeah.
Tim Burris and Brooks and Gio. Those guys are just so great to hang with. They're just so fun to sit and talk with, and it's all that 80s music that I played for so many years that I never even get a set list or song list before the gig. It's just show up at the gig and Tim's like, here.
Right.
If there's anything you're not sure of, let me know. We'll play it anyway.
Well, that's good that they rely on you. I mean, that speaks volumes, for your reputation and your talent, So
well, and part of trying to maintain a good reputation as a fill-in guy, and not piss off too many people, because you can't keep everybody happy. But I noticed is that there have been plenty of times where I agree to do a fill-in with a band that makes a lesser amount than some of the other bands. Let's just say it that way. And I might have agreed to a gig, and it's on my calendar, and then I get a call from a band like Breakfast Club, or one of these bands that gets paid quite a bit more money,
right? And
it would be a better gig. And I would, as much as I would hate to do it, like I made a rule when I started doing fill-ins with myself, and I'll never break it. When I got a gig on my calendar, I'm not going to change it.
Right. You have to commit. You have to keep your word.
Unless your band is just that bad and you guys are just hacks, but then I wouldn't agree to the gig anyway in the first place.
Right. But you got to keep your word, I get that.
I think that's important.
Sure it is. Absolutely. So Let's see. Where can they find you? You are on Facebook.
Yes.
Facebook. At G Rock Music, just a letter G, Rock Music. And that'll take you to your Facebook page, which is music and sound, correct?
Yes, music and sound. I try to incorporate both. I didn't want to start up all these different Facebook pages,
right?
Because another thing that I also do, and I do it as freelance, is I do graphic design. So gotcha. I've been the guy doing Facebook posts, putting together crazy pictures of the band for special events, or I've come up with logos for several bands that I've been in, where we've made T-shirts and whatnot, and stickers or whatever. So I've kind of been a graphics guy too. So if any bands, that's also, my contact information is what it is. It's the Facebook page. You can message me or hit up my email at bassplayer456@hotmail.com. Even if whether you're looking for a fill and bass player, live sound engineer for a gig, or your band just needs a logo done professionally. I've worked with several printers over the years. Right. So that's a whole nother thing, and I love doing it. There you go, 3 things, and you can get them all at G-Rock Music on Facebook or bassplayer456@hotmail.com.
Cool. Well, Gary, I really appreciate you coming on with me. It's been great talking to you. And again, if anybody's watching this, I highly recommend Gary for sound. Not only do I think he does a great job, we've worked with him many, many times, but he's just an awesome guy to hang out with. So G-Rock Music on Facebook, bassplayer456@hotmail.com. Gary, thanks a lot, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Rick. It's been a pleasure.
Talk to you soon.
All righty.
Bye-bye.